you go.
Right, thank you once again for having me. Today I wanted to talk about common teaching mistakes. As a director of studies and a tutor on the IH CYLT course, I get to observe teachers quite a lot. So I put together a very, very short list of the most common teaching mistakes for us to focus on. So we will look at four most common, at least in my opinion, issues. We will focus on feedback stages, emergent language, preparation for speaking activities, and error correction. Okay, so I would like us to start with mismanaged feedback stages. Yeah, so when we talk about a feedback stage, here I mean the stage of your lesson in which you are supposed to give students feedback on how they did. To many teachers, this seems boring, tedious. To the students, it very often feels like the so-called creeping death. It's very often done mainly open class, and not enough attention is given to the things which we should actually focus on. So if teachers have those misconceptions, this might lead to quite a few missed opportunities for real language development on our students' part, simply because we assume they don't know anything, or they know everything, and we do not give those things enough attention. And it also leads to little engagement on the students' part during feedback stages. Yeah, if we look at the lesson as an entity, we notice that during every single lesson, there are quite a few feedback stages. And if they are not done right, we might simply lose our students' attention. So it is really, really important to make sure we pay special attention to those stages of our lesson. This comes down to very careful lesson preparation, but it also boils down to looking at the task you're doing very, very carefully and analyzing it from your, target language perspective, so to say. Right, so you simply need to look at every single example they have to do, or the question posed by the task itself, and try and predict what your students' answers might be. Yeah, this should help you identify the most important learning opportunities in each activity. This will also mean that you become selective. You don't necessarily focus on everything. And we shouldn't also forget that at certain points, especially if our students are confident, we can simply hand over to them, right? They can be the ones sharing their knowledge with the group. They can be the ones who give us justification for their answers. Yeah, it doesn't always have to be teacher-led. Another thing I wanted to focus on today is not exploiting emergent language. By emergent language, I mean language which is produced by the students spontaneously, or it's language that students want to produce spontaneously, but maybe they can't because their English isn't good enough. Unfortunately, many teachers feel there isn't enough time for this in every lesson. Yeah, many teachers think that once they've decided on a lesson aim, they have to stick to it and they can not deviate from it. And the same applies to, when they think about the curriculum, they think it's not actually worth spending time on. And if this is the thinking we hold, then there are quite a few negative consequences for our students. First of all, this might lead to students overusing their L1 simply because they don't have the language to express certain things in. And of course, this basically means that they don't learn any useful real life language. It means that we are not exploiting the context of the lesson or of the situation we're in to give them the right tools to use English and to develop. This also means that we might be actually, in a way, disregarding our students. We are not giving them any space. Our teaching might then become less relevant, less personal, and thus less important to our students. In order to make sure we exploit emergent language, in order to make sure we pay attention to it, It is very important to make sure we look at the whole course as a, as an entity, as a whole. And in the first couple of weeks of the course, during the first lessons, it is very important to equip our students with the tools they will use later in the year. Yeah, so we really need to give them some useful classroom language to work with. We need to help them with expressions like, can I go to the toilet, and so on, or maybe it's someone's birthday. So as such, we need to remember about equipping them with those things. If we are quite forgetful, which happens, especially, if it's the beginning of the year or if we're under pressure, I would simply encourage you to have a section on the whiteboard devoted to emergent language. This helps those of us who are quite forgetful. Another thing I wanted to focus on today is preparation for speaking tasks. When I observe teachers, I often notice that, yeah, they involve a number of speaking tasks in their lessons, but very often there's not enough preparation, not enough appropriate preparation for it. Yeah, some teachers are perfectly happy as long as their students are simply doing speaking. Some have the misconception that speaking is the easiest the easiest skill to teach and requires no preparation. But if that's the case, then why do our students underperform? If that's the case, why aren't such teachers always happy with the language their students produce, with the content, yeah, of their output and the functional language they use? So if this might also lead to students simply not developing their speaking skills, not reaching their full potential. So a couple of solutions here. I think it mainly boils down to careful lesson planning and making sure we are familiar with the structure of a good speaking lesson. A good speaking lesson has a number of pre-speaking stages, which we should always remember about. And then once we are familiar with the structure, we can easily prepare a checklist to follow during the lesson. And if we tick all of the boxes on our plan, if we equip the students with the right tools, be it language, be it content points, then our students are far more likely to be successful in a speaking task, especially if we are talking about exam speaking preparation, right? Which is something that is quite important to many of our students. And the final thing I wanted to focus on today is problems with error correction. There are certain beliefs teachers hold. Some teachers think it's perfectly fine if we interrupt a student every single time they make a mistake, just because we want, or they want to show them that, well, you're actually wrong. There's the contrary belief that, well, actually, I can understand the student, so why should I correct them? Yeah. So there are certain views there which are not necessarily useful. And such mistakes might lead to either very, very low confidence on the student's part. Students might then be very reluctant to speak in class. They might be very reluctant to use English in real life just because they know they're very, very bad at it. On the other hand, if students have no experience with good and sensitive error correction, they might be unaware of their mistakes. And another thing that teachers might be doing wrong as a consequence of such misconceptions is that they might be focusing on errors which are way beyond the student's level. What can we do to make sure we approach error correction in the right way? Well, once again, this comes down to careful lesson planning and identifying moments which can be exploited for this purpose. We should know when we can do it, when we shouldn't do it. We should also know which errors to focus on. What is our lesson aim? And then we should align this with the error correction activity we want to do. I would also encourage every teacher out there to include praise and noteworthy points in their error correction stage. So if you're giving your students, I don't know, 5 mistakes to focus on, tell them that there are 2 tricky ones. Yeah, tell them that there are actually two good things to focus on there. All right, so this brings me to the end of my presentation. We have briefly looked at feedback stages, emergent language, preparation for speaking activities, and error correction. Thank you all for your attention. If you have any further questions, please feel free to contact me. This is my email address here. Thank you, everyone.